Hey, good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Just wanted to go over a interesting theory that I have. I'm not sure if it's accurate, but it's something I've been thinking about, and it ties in with a lot of books I've been reading, and I'm sure there's millions of people that are way smarter than me that can maybe make some sense of this, or tell me if I'm on the right track, or maybe just have some interesting thoughts about it. So that being said, here we go. The first part of our journey begins with our friend Manley P Hall, who was a bit of a veteran in the mystery schools and some of the occult and some of the secret teachings and stuff. In fact, the first part I'm going to be talking about is his book, Manley P Hall, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. And if you haven't picked this book up, you should. It's a really fun read. There's a lot of stuff in there. I'm working my way through, but I find myself constantly having to stop and just put my hand on my head and be like, "What? Really? Is this true? Is this really true?" And then I gotta stop and go and do research, and it's fun. I really like it, and I really enjoy it. And I'm mystified by the mystery schools and ancient knowledge and all that. So that being said, there was a particular part that made me stop and do an experiment, and I'm going to do it with you guys. So let me just go ahead and kind of paraphrase what he was talking about and set up the experiment, and then we'll do it together. So he's talking about the Druids, and a little excerpt from the book is, the Druids were priests and physicians, curing by magnetism and charging amulets with their fluidic influence. Their universal remedies were mistletoe and serpent's eggs because these substances attract the astral light in special manner. The progress of magnetism will someday reveal to us the absorbing properties of mistletoe. Here's the next part that we're going to move on. We shall then understand the secret of those spongy growths which drew the unused virtues of plants and become surcharged with tinctures and savors. Mushrooms, truffles, gall on trees, and the different kinds of mistletoe will be employed with understanding by a medical science, which will be new because it is old, but one must not move quicker than science, which precedes that it may advance the further. So I thought that part was fascinating. When he's talking about, first off, magnetism, healing with magnetism, and then he talks about how one day man will rediscover the healing power of magnetism, especially in mushrooms, truffles, gall on trees. And I thought it was interesting because I recently read a study from Johns Hopkins, which probably a lot of you have read the same study, that talks about how they're currently using psilocybin mushrooms to, help people with dementia, PTSD, and people that have had strokes, people coping with coming to terms of the end of their life. And when I read the passage in this book from Manley P Hall, and it just said one day science will again discover the healing power of these particular plants. I had to go back and reread the Johns Hopkins work, and it just blew me away because for so long some of these things have been taboo or not, for whatever reason, they've been classified as like a Schedule 1. Like that means that there's absolutely zero potential for help. And now that they're using them at Johns Hopkins, some of the best doctors in the world are using these substances to help. And the way they're doing it, the way that they're trying to understand the results, like it's clear that once they've talked to the patients who've had PTSD, that they can see a dramatic change in their behavior after one session. And if if you're curious about that, you can go to maps.org and look up some of that research, or just John Hopkins. And what I found super interesting is the way, not only are they monitoring it through behaviorism, but they'll put them in like an fMRI, which is the magnetic resonance. And so that got me thinking. I looked at the pictures, and I looked at the images that they show the brain on mushrooms, and they show the magnetic resonating images, and parts of the brain are just lit up like a Christmas tree. There's my Christmas tree. It's not lit up right now, but so I got to thinking, what is it about? How does a fMRI monitor the brain? And how does that work? So I looked it up, and I guess the M in fMRI stands for the magnetic part, and what it does is it measures the magnetism of the nuclei in hydrogen, and then a hydrogen nuclei. So the magnetism of hydrogen nuclei. And so I said, wow, I guess, the more activated the brain is, the more blood rushes to that part of the brain, whether it's the frontal lobe, or the, maybe Broca's area, or, I'm sorry, Broca's area on the left-hand side, I believe. And in the fMRI, it just shows the brain lighting up in different areas. And if there's more blood in the area, there's more water, there's more hemoglobin, there's more hydrogen nuclei for the magnetic resonance to pick up. So I thought a cool experiment would be to, actually grab a magnet, and I think I have one. Just bear with me here. I have one here, this fancy Dan, just a little small magnet. And I thought, can you replicate the little blurb that we had in Manley P Hall's in his book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages? And let's give it a whirl. So let me set down my phone right over here, and you can see that if we take a specimen like this, something that you may find in your yard, or in your garden, or your closet or something, I'm not sure, but you can take it. Now, I know none of you guys can feel this, but I can, and I hope you choose to try to replicate this experiment as well. But if you take it, you hold it by the end there, you can feel just a little bit of repulsion there. A little bit of repulsion there. It's slight, but it's there. You can definitely feel it. It's not as powerful as if you had two magnets, push them together, but you can definitely feel that there's something there. It's just a slight repulsion. So I'm not sure if we go off of what the fMRI is, maybe that is measuring the hydrogen nuclei, the hydrogen nucleus, molecules in the nucleus, I guess. But I thought it was fascinating. And what does that mean? If you take foods that are high in hydrogen, or does that mean that the more blood? Obviously, that means the more blood flow that goes to the brain, the more you can measure it. But what if we're eating a diet that's high in these magnetic molecules? These magnetic, like obviously vegetables seem to be higher, and it kind of gets back to our diet, which, and here we go, I'm going off the deep end here, which would take us to Terence McKenna's idea of the mutagenic diet, being the stoned ape theory, how we moved out of the savannah in a rush for a ever dwindling food source. We decided to try new things, and we came upon these mushrooms that helped expand the size of our brain. I believe Paul Stamets has recently brought up the stoned ape theory, and is kind of putting it back out for people to redigest. And I hope that there's I mean, Lord knows there's a lot of people smarter than me, and I hope people can revisit that. I think that there's maybe some substance to it, and I think just the way that it's helping people at Johns Hopkins and helping some of our veterans, deal with things better, and maybe even repairing actual brain damage. It's fascinating. So that's the first book that we talked about was Manley P Hall's, and I want to kind of just meander down this pathway of plausibility, if you will, and move forward with this theme of magnetism and consciousness, and tie the first book to some other books I read. And so in my previous videos, I spoke a bit about Julian Jaynes' origin of, or breakdown of the Bicameral Mine. He makes the claim that about 3,000 years ago, we weren't really conscious. We had the corresponding parts of Broca's area and Wernicke's area on the opposite side of the brain. He believes that let me just kind of paraphrase a little bit more from what I've written down on my notes here. It says, Jane suggests that the right hemisphere's lack of language capacity is because it used to be used for something else. Specifically, it was the source of admonitory images funneled to the speech centers on the left side of the brain. These manifested themselves as hallucinations that helped guide humans through situations that required complex responses, decisions, and statecraft, for instance, or whether or not to go on a risky journey. So he's saying that societal pressures and that overpopulation and just the changes on the planet caused the evolution of the speech centers to shift. I wanted to add to that a little bit. I think there's a magnetism component to that, and I know I'm going kind of woo-woo here, but what effects does magnetism really have on the brain? There's quite a few studies that talk about the transcranium magnetic hat that you'll see some biohackers wear, or there's been a recent study where people put a magnet behind their ear and it influences their decision making after just 30 minutes. They're they're less risk adverse. They'll take chances. They'll do things they wouldn't do, and it just got me thinking, what effect does the magnetic field have on us, have on our brain, have on consciousness, have on expanding consciousness? And there's so many little things that point towards the magnetic field fundamentally changing the way we are as humans. And so I just want to kind of point out a few of them, and I'm going to go over some more books and some anecdotal evidence. If you look at the map here, you guys see that there? If you go throughout history, doesn't it always kind of seem like the northern hemisphere is always kind of beaten up on the southern hemisphere? If you read von Clausewitz or Sun Tzu, all these generals, it's always the northern hemisphere beating up on the southern hemisphere. Could it be that it's the North Pole, that the magnetic field of the North Pole that causes people to be maybe more technically savvy? Is that possible? Well, according to our friends Albert Roy Davis and Walter Rawls, they've done extensive work on magnetic fields and plant growth, magnetic fields in animals. And if you get a chance to read this book, it's called The Magnetic Blueprint of Life, Albert Roy Davis, Walter C. Rawls. And they actually get into some of the research they do. There's another pretty popular YouTuber that's done some amazing experiments. And if you just pop in this guy, I forgot his name, but if you just pop in this book, he'll probably come up. He's done some amazing seed experiments where he'll take a mason jar and he'll put a high-powered magnet with the North Pole facing down, and then another hyperbola with the South Pole facing down on little seedlings, and it's pretty interesting to see what happens to those particular seedlings, the way they fruit, the way they grow, the way they don't grow, the abnormalities that happen to them. And I think it's kind of consistent with, the north side of the magnet having a profound effect on the way things grow. So if it's true for, the research in this book, if it's true for plants, if it's true for animals, it's probably true for us, right? I think that the earth grows humans the way a tree grows apples. So that's another book that you might want to check out, and just kind of adds to my theory about how magnetism tends to, shape our consciousness, shape our language maybe. And so as we keep moving forward on our theory of magnetism, North Poles and South Poles, and our theory of how magnetism can change consciousness, I wanted to go over a couple other books that kind of fit the whole thing that I'm talking about. Obviously, we've already talked about Julian Jaynes and the different speech centers, and this guy was a real genius. You got to pick this book up. It's amazing. It'll make you stay up at night. I know it did me. Like you can't sleep thinking about it. It's like, gosh, how come everyone doesn't know this? Why don't we teach this in schools? So, moving right along, there's another one that I really think everyone, if you haven't read, this guy right here, Worlds in Collision, Immanuel Velikovsky. I don't know why kids don't read this. My kid's gonna read this. This is probably what happened. If you believe like I believe, then you believe that the stories that were told to some of the indigenous people all around the world were actually history. We write them off. We write off these, like the Hopis creation stories and some of the Mayas and the indigenous people's creation stories are probably closer to the truth than anything that, well, I want to be careful. They're just as good as what the scientists have brought us, right? Sometimes I think that science is the unwavering belief in the ignorance of experts. They have all these, this is definitely what happened, and this is definitely what happened, and there's all these conflicts of interest. And if you look at our history, whether it's Galileo, Copernicus, it seems like we always get it wrong. And if we always get it wrong, isn't it fair to say that we're probably wrong now? I heard a great quote one time that was, the world is not only stranger than you imagine, it's stranger than you can imagine. And so basically what we're suffering from is a lack of imagination. We have all these people that go to schools that in order to get their degree, they have to repeat what someone else's livelihood depends on. It's a pretty big conflict of interest. So here's another one that kind of fits our narrative. The Path of the Pole, our good friend Charles Hapgood. And, the reason him and Velikovsky are kind of tied together is because of they both believe in catastrophic events that shaped the world. Modern day geology and modern day science tend to write off catastrophism as just foolishness, just tomfoolery. However, the more that I read about it, and Immanuel Velikovsky has a series of books. Like, this is just one of them. I'll show you some other ones that I know Joe Rogan's a pretty popular guy, and he's had Randall Carlson on and Graham Hancock. And, these Immanuel Velikovsky, I think, is probably, Graham Hancock is just scratching the surface of what Velikovsky talked about. If you like Graham Hancock, if you like Russell Carlson or Randall Carlson, then you'll love this guy. So this is Worlds in Collision, Ages in Chaos, Earth in Upheaval, Immanuel Velikovsky. I'm a big fan of the hard copies, and if you get a first edition. They have the new ones that are paper, but there's something about reading the actual hard copy. And, they just talk about how, and this is kind of out there too, but the amount of footnotes, the amount of research that Velikovsky did, it'll blow your mind. It'll blow your mind. And I highly recommend you guys all take an opportunity to pick up those books, because it's fascinating. That's what I'll kind of go into a little bit. So if you can walk with me down this potential path of catastrophic events that shape the world, and at least say, hey, it's possible, George. That could have happened. Let me ask you this: how does that change the magnetic field? How does that change the polarity, the electromagnetic field of our planet? And what did that do to our brains? I believe it was, my opinion that I've come to after reading a bunch of these books, and I think that the thread that ties them all together is that 500,000 years ago or 2 million years ago, whoever you want to read to or believe, that the human brain was radically increased by 3 times in volume. I think it was electromagnetism. I think it was the electromagnetic field that rapidly changed and is still changing today. That is what is shaping the evolution of consciousness. Now, I know that conscious is a broad term, so let me try to break it down. I think that is what is changing the chemistry in our brain. Clearly, as we move through the precession of the equinox, as we move through through Leo, Sagittarius, as we go through these different houses, there's different magnetic fields there. And, I think one way to prove this theory, and I haven't done this yet, this is all just wild speculation, but it's fun for me and I enjoy talking about it. I've got a couple books, and what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to go back and, you can actually see, if you read like Philo Judaeus, and if you read some of the Homeric verses, you can, and Velikovsky especially, you can find out what constellations were in the sky, and you can kind of get an idea of what the heavens look like at that point in time. And if you can do that, if you can find out where we were at that time in the cosmic year and what house we were in, you'll have an idea potentially of what the magnetic field, what area, at least today, the magnetic field is in that area, and where the Earth was in that area. And then you can go forward and start making guesses about, oh, well, this is the fluff we're moving through, or this is the cloud we're moving through now. And, the research is in its infancy as far as cosmic magnetic fields, cosmic magnetic resonances. But I believe there's something there. I believe that's what all these books point to. Here's another good one too. This is called Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, the classic illustrated edition of 1882 by Ignatius Donnelly. And, this kind of ties in with Graham Hancock as well. And, here we have potentially, what could have been Atlantis here. Here's the Strait of Gibraltar down here. And if you read Timaeus or listen to what Solon was told by the Egyptians, a lot of speculation is that there was something here. But there was a giant flood, and in a day, one of the most advanced societies the Earth has ever known is, boom, gone. And if you read Immanuel Velikovsky, he'll give you the reasons why that happened, and it's a catastrophic event that happened. Graham Hancock talks a lot about the pyramids and some of the hieroglyphics on the pyramids, and he talks about Göbekli Tepe and Quetzalcoatl, and there's always one part that I'm thinking of right now is that on all the pyramids there's this let's see, remember this one here, kind of map of the ancient sea kings. Doesn't that sound like a seafaring race? And this is the book where they have all the shores, all the little inlets, all the bays of you know, I don't know if you can see it on my map down here. Probably not. But they have the whole Antarctic map, all the bays, and, you know, Lord knows what's going on down there. But apparently somebody was mapping that. And that's the map that came from, like the P-Res map that came from possibly the Library of Alexandria. But the reason this book is so important is that it continues to tie together all the previous books that we've talked about. It ties this to Velikovsky. Velikovsky, this to the, you know, this is the same as Charles Hapgood's Path of the Poles. And they all could have radically changed obviously they changed the North Pole, the South Pole, but more than that, some of the catastrophic events they've talked about are, you know, planet-sized bodies buzzing us. Just, you know, think about the one that landed down here in the Yucatan, right? That they think maybe caused all the dinosaurs to die. And, you know, didn't have to be a lot less gravity for dinosaurs to be that big. You know, wouldn't that change the magnetic field? And what about the Tuskegee event? Like, and if you tie that, I know it's speculation, but if you tie that up here with, you know, our good friend Plato, and they talk about the fall of man and the men of gold, men of silver, men of iron, men of brass. And, you know, is it possible that maybe as our planet makes its way through the cosmic year, as it goes around the galaxy, just like there's seasons for temperature, there's definitely hot spots of magnetic fields or low spots of magnetic fields or Birkeland currents, or, you know, as we move and we make our way twisting and winding through the galaxy, the effects of the magnetic fields have to have a profound effect, not only on the planets, but the inhabitants of the planets. And that's the point I'm trying to make here is speculation. And just, it's the one current I see going through all these books that no one really talks about. I'm not even sure if modern, you know, celestial mechanics makes an account for the electric universe. That being said, as I bring up the electric universe, this right here, if you're not familiar with Purple Dawn theory or Saturn theory, Theodore Holden and Troy D. McLaughlin, they've written a book called Cosmos in Collision, The Prehistory of Our Solar System and the Modern Man. And this book, I mean, trust me, this is one you definitely want to pick up. It talks about where all the water on our planet came from, and it's pretty deep. And I kind of want to give you a little bit about it, but I don't want to butcher it. These guys have really gone out of their way to do research, and you can go online and listen to some of their podcasts and listen to some of their speeches and just the way they tie everything together. Let me just show it to you guys again. So it's Cosmos in Collision, and it's by, there you go, Theodore Holden and Troy McLaughlin. Yeah, so I think there's something there, you know, from, so let me just show you where we've gone to. We've gone from Manley P Hall, Secret Teachings of All Ages, to Velikovsky, to Ignatius Donnelly, to Charles Hapgood, Graham Hancock. We've covered quite a bit there, and I know we're kind of deep in the woods, and we've done our experiment with magnets and mushrooms and tied that to what the experiments they're doing at Johns Hopkins. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think. I know it's kind of out there, and my theory is clearly not, you know, as solid as it should be. I'm still going to work on it, and I'm still learning this whole YouTube thing, so I'm going to try to put stuff in the show notes. I haven't really got all that stuff figured out yet, but I'm fascinated by this, and I hope somebody out there is too. I think that the answers are there for us. I think that we are entering a time in which people are getting smarter. You know, people are changing. The pace of change is
rapidly increasing. And I think that it's time for, you know, readers are leaders. Readers are leaders. And there's so many people that are just, you know, doing what they're told to do and not doing their own research, that it's a good time for people like us to just read books and come up with our theories and put them out there and debate them. And you know, let me just show you one other one that gave me the idea to look at the, you know, the celestial or the different patterns in the sky at different times. This guy right here is Anatoly Fomenko. And he's wrote a series of books called History, Fiction, or Science. There's a particular, this guy's he's a mathematician, and I believe that he studied this thing called parameter D, which is a, you know, it's a problem that talks about the time of eclipses of the moon. And if you read Anatoly Fomenko's History, Fiction, or Science, Volume 1, he'll go into, and he will elucidate. He will back up with facts, and he will go into some reasons why the timeline that we currently work under is got a lot of holes in it. It's hard to beat a Russian mathematician. You know, those guys are that's where some of the greatest minds have come from. So yeah, anyways, let me know what you guys think. Super stoked to be doing some videos, and I hope, if anything at all, maybe my video made you laugh, or it made you think about something, or, you know, it gave you an experiment you can do at home with magnets and vegetables, or magnets and mushrooms, and just give you an idea of what's happening out there, and what you can do at home to test out different states of consciousness, and, you know, do your own trip, come up with your own reasons why things are happening, and let me know what you think. So thank you guys. I appreciate your time. I hope you're having a great day, and we'll see you again a little bit later. Aloha.